All right, let's begin then. Let's all bring our palms together to make our reverential veneration to the Perfect One, the Undefeated One, the Unvanquished One. And as we do this, let us remind ourselves that this is something that extends beyond a mere mark of our respect or a demonstration of our obeisance. This serves as a pledge of our allegiance to the ultimate destination of Nibbāna, the Dhamma that we must understand to traverse the path to Nibbāna, and the practice that we must undertake individually. This is what we seek refuge in. For without refuge in these three, there is no salvation, there is no freedom, there is no happiness. It is our acknowledgement of this fact that we demonstrate through our seeking refuge in the Noble Triple Gem. We will then observe the precepts, which are our stepping stones of morality and virtue, as we undertake upon ourselves this journey to purification. And once we've done that, we will invite the countless sentient beings to join us and witness this meritorious deed, this congregation of disciples of the Buddha, as they have come together for a united purpose, and that is their personal spiritual liberation. We will invite them to join us and be amongst us and embark on the same journey as we are on, and walk with us to the end of suffering. This invitation we make with compassion, loving kindness, and a sense of gratitude. So with all that in mind, let us make a start to today's proceedings. And to do so, let us chant the Namaskara 3 times, and along with me. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I think I owe you a second half of a sermon. We talked about the precepts, and I ask you to let me know when you have all become Sakrudagamis so we can continue from where we left off. I've given you a few weeks to become Sakrudagamis. Are you ready now? Before we do that though, I would like to show you the video from your visit to Dambulla, our agriculture farm. Many of you were there, and you all took part in a grand, meritorious event. Many of you were there. I wasn't there. Logistically, it's a bit challenging to try and schedule both Guru Handru and myself to be in the same place outside of the monastery. For various reasons. If he's out, I'm in. If I'm out, he's in. That's kind of how things have to work, at least for now. There's the odd occasion where we have to break our own rules, but I always think to myself, sometimes people wonder where the moon is in the sky and whether it disappears when the sun rises. It's not actually that the moon is absent. It's there, but the sun is so bright you can't see it. If you get what I mean. And if ever the moon superimposes itself on the sun, it's never a good thing. Because then you have a solar eclipse. And whilst it might be a sight to behold once in a while, it would spell disaster if that prevailed for any length of time. The birds in the sky don't know what to do. The beasts on the land don't know what to do. Everything just becomes chaotic when there's an eclipse. That's why they don't last very long. But fortunately in this asana we don't have eclipses. We don't have solar eclipses. We have lunar eclipses. So when the sun is bright and up in the sky, the moon just vanishes into obscurity. That's what happens. If you get what I mean. So when the sun is out, there isn't really a job for the moon to do. That's why only when the sun goes to sleep does the moon come up and shows off its colors. Then again, the moon is simply reflecting the light that falls on it, because the sun is the only source of light, at least in our solar system. If you get what I mean. So you understand why my presence was not observed, because it was obsolete. Where Guru Hamdra was there, I'm also there. We are all there. But I think that was one heck of an event. It was many meritorious events coming together. There was the inauguration of several new facilities to this asana. There was the granary, which you all contributed, and you were all behind it. So that was inaugurated and offered to the Sambuddha Sasana. We have already started stacking up enough rice to feed ourselves for at least a few months. I think it will last us for a good few months. Guru Hamdra says we will get through it in about 2 months. So now the next job is for us to start filling it up. Because we've got to make hay while the sun's out. There will come a time when everything will just start to collapse, and systems as we know it. Because the way that people are going, the direction that people are heading, they are less interested in the future and they're more interested in just the now. As long as there's something to keep them engaged in the present moment, people are forgetting that there's also a tomorrow. And it's happening more and more these days. But the thing is, we keep inviting individuals to come and practice with us and get to Nibbāna. And we can only do this while the Buddha Sasana prevails. So whilst the Buddha Sasana is still alive and thriving, we can't take a risk and just let there be a time, there come a time where there's a famine or a drought, and therefore people are not able to practice the path. That's why when we make an invitation now to men, women, young and the elderly, there's also a huge responsibility that we feel on our shoulders to feed them, to shelter them, to clothe them, to heal them when they're wounded. Fortunately, it's not something I have to do alone. It's a collective effort. And the event at Dambulla was really a testimony to all that. How all of us got together and we created something beautiful for the sasana. There's also the rice mill that was inaugurated on the same day. So henceforth, when we get our grains, they can be processed, and we can now process our own grain so that we can have our own rice, at least some quantity of it. If we need a greater capacity in the future, then we can plan for that. But enough me talking. There's a video I'd really like to show you. I think if you were there in the sermon yesterday, you would have seen it. But for those who weren't, I want you to watch this, rejoice in it. And for those who were, let alone those who would have seen it only once. So, shall we? Time and time again, all I have to say is, long live the Sri Sambuddha Sasana. I want you to feel what the Sri Sambuddha Sasana means to you, ladies and gentlemen. Deep in your hearts. It is a place that has united all of us. Those of us who were on very divergent and diverse paths. Those of us who were lost, destitute and desperate. Helpless and hopeless. The Sambuddha Sasana is what has given us all purpose, direction, meaning, purpose. It has helped us discover that the purpose of life is to understand the purpose of life. You didn't really know what the purpose of life was. You lived life with no understanding of what its purpose was. But the Sasana has given you the opportunity to understand the purpose of life. Now, for you, life has become a journey on which you continue to understand the purpose of living and life itself. Look at all the opportunities that the Sasana has presented to you. That whole event was centered around the granary. All the other bits all came together just at the right time. It was such a beautiful coincidence that the copra hut was ready just on time. And so when the construction of the granary was done, with your contribution and support, and then we were scheduling the day for your visit there, our team in Dhamma said, well, the copra hut is also ready, so why don't we all do it together? Magnificent. And look at how everyone was there, and none of them felt that they'd all come from different families. When we come under the flag of the Sasana, the banner of the Sasana, you don't feel that you are separate to one another, that you are from different families, you are from different creeds, you are from different races, you are from different countries or different nations. You don't identify with your race. I don't even feel that I'm male anymore. I don't identify with my gender. When we come together in the Sasana, the only thing that comes to mind is the purpose of us being there. That is why the lyrics say, Nivennatanam. If freedom is what you seek, if extinguishing the fires of raga, dvesha and moha, unconditional happiness is what you seek, Buddhun Genam. If you are disciples of the Buddha, Buddhun Venuen, on behalf of Buddha, and you know what Buddha is now. I don't mean who the Buddha was, I mean what Buddha represents. Diviya Buddha then. Give your life to that purpose. Whatever you want in life, you have to give your entire life to that purpose. Then you get it unreservedly. That is what commitment is. Don't worry, I won't give last week's lecture today again. It's difficult to keep me from meandering there, because if you know how I feel about you and how I feel for you, then you will understand why I have this constant tug when I see your faces and I feel this is not where you belong. You belong at home. This is not home. Your home is Nibbāna, because that's where you all came from. Although today you don't remember that. But to go back home, you have to give your life. Give your everything. Give yourself entirely, unreservedly. I'm not going to suggest that it's easy to do or that it can be done overnight. It cannot be done in one breath, but every breath counts. Every little bit that you give not to but give up is the price that we pay for Nibbāna. See, as you observed every individual who joined that event, you were there, others were there. Many and most of them were devotees of the Arame, and they were also their friends, relations and other visitors as well. All invited by people like yourselves. None of them were there to feed their family. You know, their family, their nuclear family. None of them were there for their nuclear families. None of them were there for their children. Their own children, none of them were there for that. None of them were there for their spouses or their future or their careers. There wasn't a tinge of selfishness. That was pure selflessness. Everyone was there for whom? For everyone. That is what the sasana is. It's where everyone comes together for everyone. A couple of weeks ago we talked about the offering at Andigam. Something that had been acquired for one individual, for one family, that was given up for whom? For everyone. You think when that gentleman acquired that land for him and his family, whenever that happened, would you all have gone there to celebrate that? Huh? Packed up, got your transport arranged, taken time off from work, whatever. Would you all have gone there for that event where he was doing it for him and his family? Would you? No, but why did you go on this occasion? Because it was not for him. It was not for his family. The same thing at Dambulla. Dambulla was also a land that was once a land that belonged to one individual. At the Arama we call him Dambulla. Several years ago it was offered to the sasana. First his daughter was offered to the sasana, and then his land was offered to the sasana. She's living a very successful life as an anagarika. He wanted to give his everything to the sasana. But when he originally acquired the land for himself and his family, would you have gone there to celebrate it? To rejoice in it? Rejoice in what? Selfishness? What's there to rejoice in selfishness? Only he and his people would have been there. Am I right or wrong? Indeed. But then, that week, the video, people had come from long and far. Far and wide people had come. People thronged there from across the land. Because something was happening not for one person or for one family. It was happening for for everyone. One for all and all for one. There's nowhere it is truer than in the Sambuddhasasana, ladies and gentlemen. Each one of us is doing this for all of us. And all of us are doing it for each and every one of us. Because selfishness has no place in the sasana. The sasana is the opposite of selfishness. It is the graveyard of selfishness. Excuse me. The sasana is the graveyard of selfishness. Ignorance and attachment. This is the maternity ward for selfishness. But the Sambuddhasasana is its graveyard. It's where selfishness ends, once and for all. Rejoice in that. Rejoice in us doing something for everyone. Regardless of religion, regardless of faith, regardless of belief, regardless of gender, regardless of race, background, black or white, man or woman, adult or child. I want you all to transcend these physical manifestations and try and see the chittas in each and every one. Because that is where we are united. A chitta can take a purpose. Bodies, they don't have a purpose. These things, they don't have purpose. That's why you can do whatever you want with them. If you want to do good, you can use your hands to do good. If you want to do bad, evil, you can use your hands to do evil. They have no purpose. Your hands have no purpose. It's your mind that has a purpose. Therefore, we can only be united when we look past our physical appearances, our physical forms, our physical bodies, and start to recognize that each and every one of us is a mind that seeks freedom and happiness, liberation, unconditional joy. So when you see that, now you see that all there is a purpose, a united purpose. That's all this room is full of, a united purpose. You'll all have different names, you'll have different surnames. You all come from different backgrounds. Your complexions are very different to one another. The way you wear your hair is very different to one another. The way you dress yourself up, the way you groom yourself, this is all very different to one another. But the fact that you're all chittas, and each of those chittas are striving for one unitary purpose, that is what unites everyone. Like the beads of a necklace. Without the string, these are just beads. They have no purpose. But pass a string through them and tie the two ends together. Now each and every one of those beads contributes to each other. One for all and all for one. Isn't that what a necklace is? If you remove the string, you just have a bunch of beads, stones, rocks, whatever. They have no purpose. They'll just be strewn across the floor, across the table, wherever. But you take that string and pass it through them, and then tie the two ends together. Now each gem, each rock, each diamond, each pebble, or whatever it is it's made of, contributes to the necklace, all for one. And that necklace is what gives value in turn to each of those beads. You can buy a flower individually, but you can also buy a flower arrangement, a floral arrangement, as one unit. Each flower on its own is not as beautiful. But you make a floral arrangement, just look at this for instance. Can you see the beauty of this floral arrangement? If I just took each flower and just laid it out on the table, individually, discreetly, would it have the same appearance? Would it be as appealing? But is this not just all those flowers together anyway? I could take each of these flowers and just lay them across the table, couldn't I? Would it look as appealing? But the same flowers, I put them back on this, in this arrangement. What would you rather look at? Which one's prettier? Of course. One for all and all for one. See, that is where unity, that's what unity does. That's what harmony brings. A beauty that does not exist in the individual parts. That's what harmony brings. Think of all the meritorious deeds that you do as a community. When Swami Nibbāna goes on Pindapata at the end of these sermons, you fill his alms bowl with more than enough food. He can't consume all of that. This is all Swami Nibbāna needs for one meal. How much do you offer him? This much. Of course, I'm sure each and every one of you here has enough to come and to bring some food from home to fill his entire alms bowl. I'm sure of that. I don't think there's anyone here for whom the amount you offer is all you can afford. Those little square sandwiches, half inch by half inch. I'm sure you can afford a little bit more than that. I'm sure you have enough to fill his entire alms bowl. But just imagine if you did that. Just think about that. Individually, you fill his alms bowl up. I doubt you will have the same joy. I doubt you will have the same joy as you do today when all of you contribute and you witness how each and every one of you takes a turn to put something into the alms bowl. And the smiles you see in their faces. You would not be able to do what you do today, which is when you bring something but someone else has shown up but they have brought nothing with them. There are many, probably even all of you are prepared to give what you have brought to that individual so that they can make an offering. Their offering is the food, your offering is the offering, the gift of giving. How could you do that? If you determine to fill his alms bowl up, individually, personally, and not let anyone else have that chance. That's why even an alms giving that you organize at home is probably not as meritorious as the alms giving you do here. I'm serious about this. It's probably not as meritorious because there it's your alms giving. That's how people feel about it. Mage dane. You know that dane, don't you? Mage dane. Mage gedara mage dane. My alms giving at my place. This is not my alms giving at my place that you do here every Sunday. What is this? This is our alms giving at our place. So it's not just a bit of food that you offer. You give everyone a chance to offer. Answer this question. What you give is? If you give a bit of food, what do you get back? A bit of food. If you give someone the chance to offer, what do you get back? The chance to offer. Nature responds in like. Whatever you give is what you get. That's how you get these opportunities to earn more merits. Because you give the opportunity to earn merits. You share in merit making. It's truly beautiful the way that you have organized yourselves, and you are big in your hearts, ladies and gentlemen, to be able to do that. Because it's not everywhere I see that. Fortunately, these days I don't have to go places where I don't see that. Wherever I go, I only see people who are like that. Because we are only invited to places where people subscribe to the same teaching of the same Buddha, so that they're all walking to the same destination of selflessness. Then it doesn't matter who it is that makes the offering, as long as the offering is made. Someone benefits from the receiving, someone benefits from the giving. As long as that happens, you're happy. So every community that we walk into, go into, is now like that. And that's a great privilege that we enjoy, really. I'm fortunate in that regard. I only have to associate with people who are like that. Actually, my life has changed so much now that I don't even get to associate with selfish people. I don't have to. Because they can't come as far as me. They can't reach me anymore, the selfish people. I don't have time for them. And even if I did, if they came up to me and talked to me, either they have to go away, giving up their selfishness and become selfless, or they're trying to convince me that I should be self-centered and help them and not everyone, and then they become disinterested and walk away anyway. So those conversations are very short-lived. But you have managed to bring Swamin Wahanse here for 3 long years now. Long, I emphasize. Believe you me, ladies and gentlemen, you have been doing it by the qualities that you demonstrate. It is who you are that is deserving of these talks, that is deserving of the Mahasangha's association. Who you have become is the most beautiful part of these sermons. It is the miracle, not the sermon, not the preacher. It's the transformation. That is the miracle. That selfless giving, that it doesn't matter who offers the pirikara. I know there are times where people who are first timers, there's no way they could have brought a pirikara. Some of them walk in here seeing probably a Swamin Wahanse for the first time. How can there ever be a possibility that they will come here bearing gifts? They don't even know what the sermon's about. But typically they walk up here with something in their hands. And the funny thing is, sometimes they're all wrapped in the same wrapping paper. So of course the cat's out the bag then. So then I know who's responsible for that. None other than the Dharmishta Rajagiriyans. That is beautiful, I tell you. These are the things I admire. Your understanding of the Dhamma, trust me, comes second. The extent to which you can talk the Dhamma, you can explain the Dhamma, the depth of Dhamma that you have been able to touch, these are all secondary to me. If you consider me a teacher, then please remember these words. The caliber of student that I expect from each of you. I'm not here for students of Dhamma, because this is not a Dhammpa seller. This is a school of life. We are here to learn how to live a good life, live a wholesome life, live a righteous life, live a life so wholesome, so good, that other people want to come and spend time with us. That's the kind of life that I expect each and every one of you to build, develop, and instill into yourselves. Become someone that people look forward to spending time with you. Become someone that people at the end of a Sunday, as they go home, they're counting the days on their fingers. When can I go back and see him again? Not him. Him in this audience. Not when can I go and see him again. Not that. Don't want that. When can I go back and see her again? My noble friend, my noble companion. That kindness, that generosity, that lady who came up to me and said, "You don't have anything to offer Swami Nwansi, do you? Here, take mine." To which you were thinking, "But I don't even know you. Why would you?" I mean, who does that? That interaction, that individual who prompted those questions in your mind, who does that? Who gives something to someone to go and offer to someone else? Because typically when people offer something, they expect the Swamin Wahanse to acknowledge that. Typically. Even if it's not a Swamin Wahanse, you give someone a gift, you expect them to remember that it was you who gave it to them. This is how the mind works. The selfish mind, I mean. So if you come up to Swamin Wahanse and you offer Swamin Wahanse Pirikara, Swamin Wahanse is expected to remember that it was you who offered that. That's not an offering, really. That's an I aming. Hey, I'm here. That was me. There'll be occasions where then they will visit the temple another time later. Swami Wahanse, that one I offered you that day, where is it? Are you using it? That's not an offering, really. Because giving to is not what we are talking about here. But giving up. Giving up. On a scale of virtue, ladies and gentlemen, giving to is very low in comparison to the giving up. Because when you give to, you care about who it is that receives it. But when you give up, does it matter? Does it? No. Then it's a giving to the universe. It's an acknowledgement that each and every component is a component of the universe. Each and every individual is a child of the universe. Therefore, it doesn't matter who takes it. Because we are all the same. We are all one. Think of it this way. You've cooked something nice at home. Okay? And you want to give it to your neighbors. A part of it you want to share with your neighbors. They have 3 children. One of them comes round to your place because he or she wants to play with your child. Do you care which of the children come to your home for you to give that part that you want to share with them? So they have 3 children. Do you care which one comes? Your plan is to send a part of what you've cooked with one of the children so that they can take it home. Does it matter which one of them comes? Does it? Of course not. Why not? Because it all goes back to the same place. But assume that the 3 of them lived in 3 different households. As in, they're not all the offspring or children of one family, but individually they are one child in each family, but they are in neighboring houses. You only like your neighbor. You don't like the ones next door and the one after. You don't get along much with them. Don't like them very much. But your neighbor, you're all right with them. Now, does it not matter which child comes home? So, if the other 2 children come, you'll probably hide it somewhere so that they won't ask you, "Auntie, what's that?" In fact, let's assume that the 3 children came, but you only want to give it to your immediate neighbor, not the other ones. Tell me what you might do. So for convenience, you want to send it with that child. But what might you do as you give this to this child? The other 2 children are also there. I'll tell you what you might do. You'll ask him to come to a side first. Buddha, here, take this. You put in a bag, put in another bag, put in another bag. Then you come up with some story. If they ask, Just tell them it's something for your mother. Don't tell them that this is something edible. It's just something for your mother. See, now you'll teach them lies as well. Okay? And don't hand it over to anyone. You take it personally and you go and give it to your mother. If anyone asks you, if especially those two ask you, just tell them auntie gave you something to take to your mother. Don't tell them it was the cake or whatever it is that you made and you wanted to share. You will be very particular about the fact that you'll be very particular that the other two children don't witness this. Because if they do, what would you have to do? Also give them a part. You'd have to be this way because you only like your immediate neighbor and not the other one. But if they were all from the same family, then it doesn't matter. In fact, if the other two came and asked, auntie, can I have some as well? What would you say? Pute, here. I've already given some to your brother. Puta, why don't you share it with them? Oh, once you go home, you can have it because I gave it to your brother. He will share it with you when you get back home. Is that not the same to when you give something to someone versus give something up so that anyone can take it? There's a stark difference between these two things. I really want you to recognize this and acknowledge this. Understand the difference between these two things, ladies and gentlemen. Seriously understand the difference between these two things. Giving something to and giving something up are phenomena that are worlds apart. They are not one and the same. So when it's the church, when it's the mosque, when it's the temple, when it's the kovil, you're not giving something to someone. You're giving up for everyone. That's why I say it's far more meritorious what you do here, in my opinion, to the almsgiving that you might organize at home. I'm not suggesting that you must not do that, but what I'm saying is the mentality is different. Because at home it's my dane, my temple, my hamduros at my home. Answer this question for a second. Let's say you invited 10 Swaminvanses from your local temple. Okay? You get to hear that someone else has also organized a dana. But you had booked it all and prepared all that for 10 monks. So now you get a call from the temple saying, Ape Nona, another person has organized a dana and sorry, it was a last minute invitation only yesterday. Of course, you made the invitation and planned everything a month in advance, but this only came in yesterday. Apparently it's some emergency and they wanted the Swaminvanses there. They have asked for 5. Is it okay if we just send 5 to your place and the other 5 Swaminvanses will go to the other place? Yes? So you've made arrangements for 10, but now you're only going to get 5. People will be prepared to commit homicide. Trust me. That's how far some people will be willing to go. They forget the fact that it is a dana they want to give. That it is for the Swaminvanses, it is for peace, it is for love, it is for compassion, it is for loving kindness. They forget the precepts. They forget Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi. They forget all that. Because it is my dana at my place for my monks. And it was my booking. I booked it a month in advance. Do you see? Selfishness again. How much merit do you think you can gain by offering an alms like that? I won't say 0, because the monks are still virtuous. As a matter of fact, the only merit you'll probably earn is in due of the virtue of the monks who will be attending your almsgiving. So everything is on their account. Probably next to none on your part. Because Chetanaham bhikkhave kammam vadami. Karma is your intention. Your intention should be selflessness. Where your intention becomes selfishness, then the amount of merit you earn out of any giving that is like that is next to nothing. That is why, if you are prepared to hear me say these things, feeding your children, feeding your spouses, earns you how much merit? Because who are you feeding? My children, my family, my spouse. But what do you spend most of your life doing? What do you spend most of your lives doing? Feeding the Mahasangha or feeding your families? Feeding your families. How much merit do you get out of it? Next to nothing. You will get a little bit of merits only because they are human. By virtue of the fact that they are human, because it's better to feed a human than it is to feed a dog. In fact, you can feed an unvirtuous, a vile, wicked, vicious man. It's far more meritorious to feed one of them than to feed 100 dogs. Not my words. It's in the Dakkina Vibhanga Sutta, preached by the Buddha. By mere virtue of the fact that he is a human or she is a human, you earn a lot more merits, because on the merit scale, on the virtue scale, a human is far above the animal realm. I don't make the rules. I'm only here to share them with you. But I am sure that there are some people out there, not here, out there, who are prepared to feed their pet. But if a beggar comes up and asks for something, what might they do? They'll chase the beggar, but they'll feed their pet. Sometimes they might even go to the supermarket and buy premium product. Pet food, dog food, cat food, bring it home, cook it, garnish it, serve it on the finest place, whatever, maybe even put a knife and a fork and a spoon or something, and then place it by their pet dog. But if a beggar comes up to the house, asking for some scraps, leftovers, I'm very hungry, Nona, can I have something to eat, please? The response will usually be, if you have your arms and your legs, if you can work for yourself, go and feed yourself. Well, why don't you say the same thing to your dog? The dog also has its arms and its legs. What does the dog do for you? Does it till your land? Does it cook for you, clean for you, wash for you, sweep the house for you? These days, they don't even keep the strangers out or keep you safe, because those dogs are far too tame for that. Back in those days, the dogs used to protect the household, but now the householders have to protect the dogs, because they have been tamed to that extent. And that is better than making the animal do your dirty work for you. I really wouldn't recommend that. To somehow make your dog ferocious by agitating it and aggravating it and turning it on strangers, that's not a nice thing to do at all. That earns you demerit whenever you do that. I think I talked about this once. But besides the fact, the point of this discussion being, it's far more meritorious to feed a stranger, to feed a beggar, than to feed 100 dogs. But aren't there people out there who would rather feed their pet, who would rather put food into their fish tank than feed a beggar? Now I know, if there are animal rights activists here, or people listening to this There will be a hartal outside next Sunday. There will be a protest. Once again, I'm not sharing with you my creations or my ingenious devices. I'm only sharing with you the teaching of the Buddha. Take the Dakkina Vibhanga Sutta. He details at great length how the merit power that you gain out of doing a meritorious deed is dependent directly on the virtue of the individual receiving it. He goes all the way up from an animal to a supreme Buddha, and how at each level the amount of merit you earn is greater. In conclusion, he says, far more meritorious than feeding an individual Buddha or giving something to an individual Buddha is to give to the Mahasangha. And then he finally says, there's one thing even better than that. That is to contemplate anicca, dukkha and anatta for one split second. That is what tops it all. Why? Why is that so? Why do you think that is? Because the Buddha said so, so it must be. No. Nothing is so because the Buddha said so. It is so, therefore the Buddha says so. Right? Don't mix the two up. Nothing is so because the Buddha says so. Then how is it? It is so, therefore the Buddha says so. That's how it is. He doesn't invent or create truths. He discovers them and then he preaches them. He's a teacher, not an inventor. So why is it that a moment of contemplation of anicca, dukkha, anatta is infinitely more meritorious? Let me tell you why. Because anything below that is an offering from someone to someone. It's an offering between two entities. I give to someone. Think about it. So, for example, the Buddha says, it is far more meritorious to offer something, anything, food, whatever, okay? Anything to a virtuous man, a virtuous individual, a virtuous human being, than it is to offer something to an unvirtuous individual. 100 times more, let's say. But in both these cases, if you are the one who's making the offering, now you still have two entities, don't you? See, here's you. You, the entity. This is the giving party. Here's the receiving party. So here you have a virtuous or an unvirtuous man, and you have a virtuous man. When you give something to a virtuous and unvirtuous, when you give something to a virtuous man, I give two. This is a two. One entity, another entity. When you give to an unvirtuous man, what is it again? I give two. Remember, this two is what? This is all worldly. It undermines the value of the giving. It undervalues the potency of that giving. But what happens when you give up? And how is giving up even possible? This is why the Buddha tops this giving, this charity, with the momentary contemplation of anicca, dukkha, anatta. Because when you contemplate anicca, dukkha and anatta, at least for a split second, at that moment, ladies and gentlemen, what happens to entities? They vanish, they disappear. There's no more an entity. Because anicca, dukkha, anatta is the theory of everything. In other words, it is what unites everything. Therefore, all this separation fades into oblivion. Therefore, at that moment, at a moment where you contemplate anicca, dukkha, anatta, you don't exist, they don't exist. Therefore, it's not you giving to someone. It's a giving up. Who's giving up? Who's giving up? No one's giving up. It's a giving up. It's very difficult to sometimes get our heads around this fact. What do you mean no one's giving up? Someone's giving up. No. The whole point of giving up is that there is no one who's giving up and there's no one who's taking it either. Only when you talk about giving to, there's a transaction between two parties. There's a giver and a receiver. The moment you bring in anicca, dukkha, anatta, there are no receivers and neither are there any givers. That's why when anicca, dukkha, anatta steps in, God disappears. What? What is God? Give or deny. That is how we have come to understand God. That is why we don't deny God. This is how we understand. This is how we make sense of God. When you give to, God keeps a record. When you deny from, God keeps a record. Because that's a ledger where every transaction is recorded. And in every transaction there are two parties. I to he, she, it, them. Yes? So that's how God keeps a record of things. This lady has given something to that man. This man has given something to that lady. This person has given something to those children. Those children are giving something to those elders, and so on. So there are these transactions between parties. And each of those transactions trigger a ledger entry, and that goes into a log. So what does God do? He has his big book, doesn't he? In which each of our transactions are recorded. So when there's judgment day, what happens? So that's when they do the accounts. They balance the book, right? And finally they give a result. So either you're in the red, in which case you're going to be red for a long time, or you're in the black and you can go and enjoy yourself, have a jolly good time. Not in the heaven or in the purgatory. But what if there's no book? Or rather, what if no entry is made in the book? No entries in the book. When you give up, actually it's wrong to say when you give up as well. It's wrong to say when you give up, because when there's a moment of giving up, ladies and gentlemen, there is no person who gives up. It's just the action. Giving up happens. No one gives to, no one gives from. When it rains, does the sky give water to earth? Is that what happens? The sky gives water to earth. Is that what happens? No, that's not what happens. It rains. No one's giving anything to anyone. There's no transaction there. It's just a natural phenomenon. No one's giving anything to anyone. It's a natural phenomenon. You can be like that when anicca, dukkha, anatta runs in your mind. When anicca, dukkha, anatta runs in your mind, you lose a sense of ownership. It's not about giving anything to anyone. See, when I give this to you, when I give this to you and you take it, I will forever remember that it is mine, it was mine first, and now it's yours. Won't I? Isn't that what we do with things that we get from people? How do sometimes things have sentimental value? The walking stick my grandfather left behind. This is my grandfather's walking stick. This is my great-grandmother's Zimmer frame. You might have that at home as well. This is my father's briefcase. This is the one he always took to work, and I still have it at home. This is my grandmother's ring. And so on. So, even if you are the one who is now in ownership or in possession of these objects, there was always someone who gave it to you. Therefore, there's like this chain of ownership. You can trace back. We call it the pedigree. You can trace it back. And we call it our heritage, passed down to us by our ancestors. So you can talk about your ancestral heritage. Lovely stories, aren't they? Everyone likes to listen to their past and how heroic they were, our ancestors and all that. Even the song that you heard today, the lyrics were talking about our ancestors and how we were there when it happened, and 10,000 of us offered alms, and today we are here to fulfill that paramita and so on. It gives us a good feeling that we were there when the Bodhisattva made a determination to become a Buddha, and today it is my determination to complete my paramita. I mean, that's all good, but that also becomes an obstacle as we step from good to greatness. When we step up from goodness to greatness, ladies and gentlemen, there comes a point where you have to drop that story. Otherwise, that story keeps you bound to samsara. I am of good heritage. Don't you sometimes feel that way? I am of the sea hella heritage. That is my legacy. You know who my great-grandmother is? Do you know who my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was? Parakram Bahu. I mean, that way we can all talk about Adam and Eve. Because we are all descendants of Adam and Eve. But are we really? The problem is not whether we are descendants of them. The problem is, are we anyone to be descendants of anyone? That is the question. It's not about whether we are descendants of someone or someone else. That's not where the question is. Because when we discuss that question, we are already in the premise that we are someone. We've already lost the game. We're already talking about an agency. That we are someone, we are an individual, we are an identity, and this identity has passed down from this particular ancestral lineage. Purebred. People like to think they are purebred. When people talk about their race, I'm a purebred Pakistani. There are no Indians in my family. So the Pakistanis might say. What would the Indians say? I'm a purebred Punjabi. No Pakistanis in my family. Purebred. So what they're saying is, if you trace back my ancestral lineage, there never was a point where there was any mixing. Which suggests that there was something that continued. Again, we invite the Atma, an entity, that has passed down from somewhere. Therefore, we've already lost the plot when we talk like that. We can talk about memory. See, where the Buddha gives all these accounts of his lives as a bodhisattva. How he was a bodhisattva at this point, did this, and he was a bodhisattva at that point and he did that. Basically what he's doing is, he's giving an account of memory that he can access. One chitta after the next chitta, after the next chitta, after the next chitta. There was a series of chittas. That's all there was. Nothing continued. Each one was a discrete chitta. There was nothing that continued from start to end. It was simply a series of chittas. You'll still struggle to get your head around this if you see the world as being one thing that has a start and an end. That's why people often sometimes ask the question, Swami, where did it all start? I mean, there are some people who struggle to come to terms with Buddhist teaching, and they're not prepared to accept Buddhist teaching until we can point them at the starting point. Some scholars are like that. But some people, they have even talked to me on occasion and said, Swaminas, I really like Buddhism, but what I really struggle with and can't accept Buddhism as my faith, the problem I have is, can't you point me at where it all started? Because I know there's a chitta after chitta after chitta after chitta after chitta, but where did the first chitta start? What happened then and what was there before that? Because what they're saying is, other faiths offer a solution to this. What they say is there was always something. In other religions, other faiths, there was something that had no beginning and something that had no end. So the concept of God is offered in that context. God has no beginning and God has no end. Therefore, there is no need to ask that question, and an answer is unwarranted after that. Something that has no beginning or end, everything else was a creation of God. So that somehow doesn't actually answer the question, but it invalidates the question. Therefore, the question is no longer a valid one. And then what they do is they also say, the Buddha has prohibited this question. They say the Buddha said, don't ask this question. There's no point in asking this question. What was the beginning? Before all of this was there, before the worlds came into existence, what was the beginning? And they say the Buddha said not to ask this question. To which people are not happy because they say, okay, so there's some knowledge that is only reserved for the Buddha. And that is very unsettling. Because then you have to take that out of blind faith. And the moment you bring blind faith into Buddhist teaching, it is no longer a philosophy that is dependent on that aligns with cause and effect. There's some aspects you are not supposed to question. Then what people say is, well, see, when you put it that way, you throw Buddhism into the same basket as some of the other religions where you're not supposed to question. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the thing. I'm going to tell you where it all started, so you can breathe easy from today. It's not that it's a question you mustn't ask. It's that it's an invalid question. Let me offer an analogy. What is this? A line. Permit me to call it a straight line? Please, it's a straight line, okay? I mean, I'm nodding your head. Out. This is a straight line, and it is a straight line if I say so. Because it's a line, you can talk about a start and an end. If you use this as your reference point, this is the start and this is the end. Okay? Travel to the other end, that is the start and this is the end. So you have a start and an end. And then if I told you that these are all individual elements, I don't know how much of this you can see, but I'm just drawing little dots on the line. Okay? If these are all individual elements, and I suggest you that each element comes after the next, or after the previous one. So this one's presence, the second element's presence, is dependent on the previous one coming into being. So what happens is, the moment you start the first one off, then there are successive elements that come and fall in place. So you have a line. Okay? It's like when you draw a line, isn't that what you do? How do you draw a line? Is this a line? What must you do when you draw a line? You select somewhere to start, and where must you place the next dot? Somewhere random? No, you have to place it right next to the first one. That's what a line is. A series of dots. But there's a very specific place they have to be in relation to the previous one. So this is math today. You come from Buddhism, you get math, you get physics, you get chemistry, you get biology, you get told off. Okay, so that's how a line is formed. Each successive dot has to be placed in a very specific place in relation to the previous dot. Are we all in agreement about what a line is? Okay, so then you have a series of dots like that. If I place one dot here and the next dot somewhere like this, that is not a line. Agreed? Okay. So two things must happen for there to be a line. What two things? You must decide where you put the first dot. That's the first thing. The next thing that has to happen, equally important, is that the second dot has to be adjacent to the previous dot. Agreed? So in terms of spatial relation, it has to be immediately next to it. And by all means, in contact with it. Okay? Right. Therefore, you can talk about a start and an end. So you can figure out where the first dot was placed and call it the start, and where the immediate dot was placed, and you can call that the end for now. Okay, so that's what we do when we draw a line. But what do you have now? A circle. Where's the start? And where's the end? You tell me where the start is, I'll tell you where the end is. I promise you. You tell me where the start of the circle is, and I will tell you where the end is. Where's the start, where's the end? There is no start, and neither there is an end. Because by definition, by its very definition, a circle has no start or end. But a line does. Okay? So this is an analogy to help you understand where it all started, or whether it did at all in the first place. Hopefully this will help you to come out of your boxed, framed thinking and think outside the boxes that you like to put yourselves in. It all comes from this entity-based thinking, that's why. The moment you understand cause and effect, okay, this question of where did it all start, it vanishes. It is only until you get your head around the principle of cause and effect will you keep asking this question. Because it must have had a start. And therefore it will one day have an end. I get the end is Nibbāna. That I get, but the start must be somewhere. That is how you feel until you get the principle of cause and effect in your mind, into your minds. Did I not explain to you a moment ago that there are two things that must be true for a line to come into existence? What were those two things? The first dot and then the second dot, what? Adjacent to the first. Therefore, you understand that there is also the phenomenon of cause and effect here. The effect of the second dot is dependent on the cause of the first. Yeah, so the first serves as a cause to the second dot. Yeah? Ladies and gentlemen, the same is true with a circle. The same is true with a circle. Each dot is both the successor and the predecessor to two dots on either side of it. So this dot is right next to this one and is also right next to this one. So if this is the cause, then these can be considered effects. If this is the cause, then this and this can be considered effects. So each dot is placed next to another dot. The only thing you can't ask is which dot came first. But cause and effect is still valid in this. Is this Greek or Greek? Some places are very blank. Blanker than they usually are. I'm not talking to you about cause and effect. I'm giving you an analogy. This analogy is to help you understand that the question of start and an end are both invalid when you understand what cause and effect is. That samsara is not something that has a start and an end. I mean, in a conventional sense, we say how we have to end samsara. Okay, we started this journey a long time ago and see how long we have been in samsara. We have come past all these Buddhas and all this. We only express it in these words because you are still in samsara. Because this is like a rocket. To escape the hemisphere or the, what do you call it? Atmosphere, yes, thank you. To escape the atmosphere, which is you have to move in the upward direction, but the force has to be applied in the downward direction. So if you remove the ground beneath you, you won't be able to jump. Do you agree? Do you understand that analogy? Too many analogies? You want to jump up, yes, but where must you push? Down. So remove the floor beneath your feet, how can you jump now? Exactly. So to convey the point of cause and effect, to convey what Nibbāna is, I must use something that is not true. Not entirely true at least. Because if I came up to you and just talked to you about pure Nibbāna, when your base is not Nibbāna, you would not understand it. If that at least kind of makes sense. Because you have to first talk to someone in words and language they understand before you get them to a dimension that they don't understand. See, you understand the first dimension, length. You understand the second dimension, width. Then you understand the third dimension, height. What is the fourth dimension? So what if someone didn't understand length, width and height even? How can you talk about a fourth dimension? How can you talk about a fifth dimension? How can you talk about a sixth dimension? Because we have a way of trying to get our heads around things. Now sorry? Yes, it has to be in relation to something, and it's in relation to something you already understand. So, when we talk about samsara, it is imperative that I speak to you in words that you understand. So I have to say the beginning of samsara and the end of samsara. Otherwise, I can't get you motivated to do something, to do Nibbāna. Because you have to walk out of this room thinking, okay, someday I can end Nibbāna, I can end samsara rather. Only then will you later come to terms that actually samsara is not something that you end someday. Samsara happens now. Therefore, Nibbāna is the extermination of samsara, and that is not something that will happen one day. It has to happen now. But tell me, when we first thought of ourselves as Buddhists, and you were introduced to the Buddha, and you were introduced to the Dhamma, and you were introduced to these concepts of Buddhism, did we not all at some point think, one day I'm going to attain Nibbāna? How did that feel to you like? Did it not feel like there was a journey that you had to traverse, and someday, it was like it was in the horizon somewhere. You just had to keep walking. Like, what is this place where you go and jump? Lovers? What's it called? Sorry? Lovers Leap. Yeah, that's the one. What's the singular word for it? Lokanta, yes. Lokanta or Lovers Leap. World's End, thank you. So that place, when people wish to take that, I don't know why, but when they wish to take that journey, they feel they have to walk up to this place, and then at the end of that, if you continued walking, that would be the end. So you just walk up all the way up and then jump. Like how when people first thought that the world was flat, people were very dead scared of sailing back then. Because if you kept sailing far enough, what would happen? Because you could see where the sea touched the sky. So that was the end, right? So if you kept sailing far enough, you would simply fall into an abyss, bottomless. That's what people thought. Until later on they realized that it was not a straight line. It was a circle. See, all these things come with time. When they thought it was a flat line, just a flat surface, they probably made a ship and then they traveled and they just kept on traveling and kept on moving and moving and moving. There was just no end. So they would have gradually come around to the fact that this is not a flat thing, it's a round thing. But this was knowledge that came to them later. Initially they thought it was a flat surface and that they would somehow travel far enough to find its end. That's what happens with everyone, ladies and gentlemen. When we first heard the Dhamma, we thought samsara is something that we have to travel and one day we'll come to the end of it. That's because you never saw samsara as a circle. You thought samsara was a straight line. There was a start somewhere and there's going to be an end somewhere. In fact, there are some aspects of Nibbāna that I'm not going to share with you deliberately, because if I do, you will feel demotivated. You will lose all motivation to practice the Dhamma. Because you're not ready for that yet. Because you don't understand certain principles. For me to reveal certain things, you have to first develop your understanding, cultivate your wisdom, and come to a certain point where you realize, actually, there's no one to do Nibbāna at all anyway. At that point, I can tell you something. But if I tell it to you too soon, then you will give up. And what would be the point of that? You would suffer anyway. You'd suffer anyway. So right now, your motivation is freedom from suffering. You all want that. You want to break free from the shackles of suffering. You don't like sorrow. You don't like fear. You don't like anger. You don't like lust. You want to come out of all these emotions that torment you, and that is your motivation. That's your driver. And you have this vision that one day you will come to the end of it, where there will be no more suffering, no more torment, no more hardship. And then there will be no nothing. That's how you feel. Let's carry on. Let's keep moving forward. As you progress, at least you have to become an anagarika for that. Otherwise, I won't tell you anything. Become an anagarika, no, actually, anagarikas even, I'm not sure. If you become a Swamin Mahanse, or as an anagarika, you complete your 18-month probation and become a permanent anagarika, then you come and tell me and I will tell you something. Not until then. Because otherwise it will simply demotivate you. Not because of the truth, but because of the way you understand that truth. If you understand what I'll give you another analogy to make sense of this. Today is the day of analogies. Would you have liked, hand on heart, would you have liked to learn the story of your origin when you were 6 years old? Where you actually came from? Would you have liked to learn that story? The truth? Aren't you fortunate? Aren't you glad that when you went and asked your father or your mother, where did I come from? And they said, the pelican brought you. Or we found you in the supermarket. The postman brought you. The milkman brought you. One fine morning we opened the door and you were out there in a cot. As confusing as those answers were, they did the job. Because you were not prepared to listen to the truth. If you'd heard the truth then, you'd have run away. Simply disgusted. Yes or no? What do you say? You'd have been disgusted. To think of your parents in that way is not a thought that you would have liked at all. What, my parents? That's what happened for me to be here? You would not have liked that thought at all. So you had to mature. Your wisdom had to grow. You had to understand how human beings work. You had to understand how emotions work. You had to understand a little bit about how lust works, how human dynamics work, how biology works. And when you were ready, they taught you the lesson. Then you take your textbooks from grade 8, grade 9. These days you don't have to wait that long. By age 5 or 6, it's self-taught, isn't it? Because friends are there to teach us all those lessons nowadays. But children are not ready to hear those things. But they do. It's very unfortunate. Really, it's really unfortunate because they lose all respect for their parents. If a child is exposed to that truth, however true it might be, there are certain truths that must not come too soon. There are certain truths that must not come too soon. That's why they say the teacher must only appear when the student is ready. If the teacher appears any sooner, the student is not prepared to learn that lesson. So there are certain lessons that you must only learn when you are ready to learn that lesson. That's why I feel very pitiful and very sad for children these days who have to learn these lessons about reproduction and how they came into existence at too tender an age. It's far too young for that. This is what we have exposed our children to, thanks to technology, and not really technology, but bad use of technology. Technology is not at fault. It's bad use of it, misuse of technology, and bad association, mainly. But hey, what can we do? So much so that if adults want lessons on reproduction, they can speak to a 6-year-old and they will tell you everything there is to know about it. All the words for it, all the synonyms for it, and every description of it. You can hear, listen, learn all of that from children. But back to the story. There's a certain truth that I will tell you when you become a monk or an anagarika. So if you want to hear that. Can't help. That's why we have a Noble Hearts program. Someone saying, but we are too old. I said, we have a Noble Hearts program. In the next one? Yeah, you can come in the next one. You can be sure by doing merit and keeping yourself in noble association. So the Noble Hearts program is there for those who believe that they are too old for the monk program or the Anagarika program. But, right, enough analogies. Come back here. Do you understand that it means the question of a start and end is invalidated the moment you think of something as a circle? But the principle of cause and effect is still there. See, this element is here in this particular position because of this element and this element. It's supported by its neighboring elements, aren't they? Oh, isn't it? Yeah. Take away its neighboring elements, where would that element end up? It would not be in this form, in this shape. So each element contributes like that to every neighboring element. The only question, now you see, do you understand that we can talk about cause and effect? Therefore, the question of cause and effect is valid. This is an effect. Are you with me, ladies and gentlemen? Is this making sense? This element is an effect. I will put a red mark around it. I'm talking about this one. This element is an effect. Effect, you can see, of two causes. These causes are either side of it. Its position here is dependent on those causes. You take away those causes, what would happen? This element will never not be able to remain in that position. Therefore, that effect of it remaining in that position is dependent on the causes either side of it. Understood? Okay. You can say that about each element on this circle. Each and every one of them you can describe what the reasons are for its being in that position. But there's one thing you cannot ask. What is the first element? That question is invalid. And what is the last element? What is the second element? The third one? The fourth one? They're called cardinal numbers, aren't they? First, second, third, fourth, and so on. Cardinal or ordinal? No, not odd and even. This, when you count it first, second, third, and so on, I think they're called cardinal numbers. So you can't ask which element is the first element. You can't ask which element is the third element, which element is the 10th element. You can't ask that question. Why can you not ask that question? Because there's no start and there's no end. But can you not still describe how the principle of cause and effect is still at play? That's still there. This is how everything is. Everything. Everything. Because everything is energy after all. You've heard the famous saying, energy cannot be created or destroyed. That's something modern day scientists, physicists readily agree with. Energy cannot be created, nor can it be destroyed. All you can do with energy is what? Transform it from one form to another. Therefore, if energy can be converted from one form to another, then each form of energy, every form of energy had a form before that. And every form of energy will have a form after that. But what will there never be? How energy started, or how it will end. Because it's in a cycle. In a cycle, there's no start or end. There's only what's next to it on either side. So you understand that the moment I talk about a cycle, the question of start and end become invalid. Then why do people ask this question? Where did I start? I was a monkey in my previous life and a donkey in the life before. Clearly. Okay, and a Deva, let's give one, okay? I was a Deva in the life previous to that, and a Brahma in the life before that, and a human being for another 10,000 lives. But as I go back, and back, when did I start? Why do people ask this question? Because they think of themselves as an entity. It's when you think of yourself as an entity, see, like this, you think there's a top and a bottom, a start and an end. Whereas if you see this as simply a continuum of energy, here energy is condensed. What about here? It's not condensed. Here, it's just not condensed, that's all. But here, energy is condensed. And it's still condensed. And there comes a point where it's no longer condensed, not at least this condensed. The density of energy reduces from this point forward. But altogether, what is this? It's just energy. Where's the start? Where's the end? Where's the start and end of this energy? Is this too deep? Where's the start and end of this energy? If this is energy, what's here? What's here? Energy. It's always energy. Well, what's this though? Light and then condensed. And then light again. What's the opposite of condensed? Uncondensed? Anyone? What? That gives a different meaning, like dispersed. So condensed and, shall I say, light for the time being? Yeah. Sorry? No. You get what I mean. Okay, it's not as condensed. Diluted. Okay. So it's not as condensed. No? So it's condensed, pretty condensed here. Here it's not condensed, but it's energy nonetheless diffused. Okay, it's not as condensed. Either side of this condensed energy, you have what? Not as condensed energy. But it's all what? Energy. What do we call a pen then? Simply condensed energy. So as I move this around in space, I'm just moving the place of condensed energy. And in other words, I'm just shifting. I'm just shifting the condensation of energy. The degree of condensation of energy is all that is being shifted around in this three-dimensional space. Where's the start? Where's the end? You can tell me a start and end of a pen, but where's the start and end of energy? Answer that question, I dare you. You can tell me the start and end of this pen. Okay, what is the length of this pen? You will quickly run away and bring a ruler and place it next to the pen and say, it's this long. Okay? What is the length of this energy? Can you say? No, why can't you tell? Because you know that this extends in this direction, in this direction, this direction, this directions. It extends in every direction. All you have here is merely condensation of that energy. Agreed? Okay, then there cannot be a start or an end. That's what's happening here. But when you fail to see, now listen carefully, when you fail to see that you, ladies and gentlemen, when you fail to see that you are nothing more than condensed energy, then you ask this question, where did I start and where will I end? That is because of your entity-based thinking. It's a false perception that you are a unit, you are an entity. But when you accept, not just acceptance for the sake of acceptance, but when you accept through wisdom, when you understand through wisdom that you are not really an entity, you are just a flux of energy. and a momentary condensation of the same, then you will no longer ask the question of where did I start and where do I end? How much of that made sense? No. Okay, I'll answer that question. When you reach Nibbāna, okay, so when you reach Nibbāna, that is when this pen stops being this pen. Does it become nothing? Can you ever make this nothing? Let's talk about the pen for a second and the answers will become obvious to you. Can this pen ever become nothing? Why not? Whatever you do to this, what's going to happen? It will change form. It will change structure. It will simply rearrange. You can maybe make something, you can condense this same energy to take another structure. I like this word, reformation. Reformation or transformation. That's a good word that fits more or less what we're trying to get across. You can transform this. You can reform this. But you can never make this nothing. The best you can do is take out structure. If you think of this as energy in a structure, you can take out structure, but you can't void this of energy, because energy is all there is. This will never be non-energy. It will always be energy. But you can, if you want, change the structure. So if you heat this, for instance, it will melt. It's because of our entity-based thinking, we think that this pen has melted. Actually, it's not that this pen has melted. Energy has taken a different structure. How did energy take this structure? It was put through a mold. Again, energy condensed in this structure. Put it into an oven. It will take that structure, put it into a cast, and then heat it up. The plastic will melt and it will take the shape of that cast. So all you're doing is restructuring energy. So the only thing you can do to this pen is what? You can restructure, transform. That's all. You can't actually make this nothing. Because energy will always be. So when you get to Nibbāna, first, what are you? Energy. Just a condensation of energy. So when you get to Nibbāna, you don't become nothing. You become structureless. Structureless. You take no structure. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why in a moment. Why you take no structure. But even this is too deep, okay? Because I'm telling you why you take no structure. There's no you to take any structure. So even as I try and explain to you something that is in a dimension that does not agree with the worldly dimension, unless you have understood anicca dukkha anatta, you will still think that I'm trying to tell you what's going to happen to you, and that will give you a fright. Oh my God, that's going to happen to me. I don't want to die. People take solace in the fact that when they die, they are reborn. Some people do. Some people are afraid to die. Others take solace in the fact that it's okay, I'll be born again. At least I'll be born again. They are both misplaced because it's not you who dies and it's not you who's going to be reborn. But, so, back to the point. Thank you for this sermon, by the way. Thank you for the sermon. I'm only the preacher. You bring the merits. I'm only the preacher. You are nothing more than condensed energy. Agreed? Okay. Body and mind, the same. Both body and mind is condensed or are condensed energy. That's it. It is condensed in a particular way. It's not random. Nothing in this world is random. That's why everything in this world is a dukkha. Nothing is random. What does dukkha mean? We've talked about this before. There's a deficiency, and to fill that deficiency, there's energy that aggregates until that deficiency is fulfilled. So if we go from deficiency to sufficiency, all creation is a response to deficiency. Make sense? That's why they say, what is the mother of invention? Necessity. AKA deficiency. Necessity, deficiency, desire, you can name it what you like. But wherever there's creation, there has to be deficiency. Because energy responds to deficiency. Why does energy respond to deficiency? It's because energy has no bias. It cannot choose not to respond because it has no prejudice. I'm going too fast, but forgive me. You can go back and watch it again. Energy has no bias, meaning energy has no prejudice. Energy has no certain way it wants to be inherently. Energy has no way it wants to be. That's why it's called anicca. No iccha. And iccha is a bias. Icchava is a bias. I want to be this way. That's my iccha. That's an appointment. That's why iccha bhanga is disappointment. The Sinhalese word for disappointment is iccha bhanga. An appointment is the way I want it to be. I want this appointment. But energy does not have that. It has no intrinsic way it wants to be. Therefore, it is free of bias, void of a bias. So if something's void of bias, wherever there's a calling, it will respond unreservedly. No hesitation. It will respond wherever there's a calling. That calling is deficiency. You create necessity somewhere, what does energy do? It comes to take that shape. So if you create a necessity here, here's what energy does. Shift it here, here's what energy does. Shift it here again, here's what energy does. So think of it like that. Just visualize it in that way. Wherever you have a deficiency, if this is energy, move the deficiency, energy aggregates there. Wherever you move the deficiency, energy follows. When you move the deficiency, why doesn't energy remain here? Because it has no bias. There's no need for it to remain here. And it cannot not respond to it. Because it has no bias. Energy is like a Rahatan Vahanse. Actually, energy is Rahatan Vahanse. In other words, Rahatan Vahanse is energy. It's when the mind accepts that it is nothing but energy, that is a Rahatan Vahanse. But why are non-arahants non-arahants? Because they're non-arahants, aren't they? Why are non-arahants non-arahants? Because they're non-arahants. That's like saying, why is a cat a cat? Because it's a cat. No, they are non-arahants because there's a void in those minds. That's what ignorance does. The moment you place ignorance in a mind, ignorance is bad knowledge. What is this bad knowledge? That there is a self, but there is no self at all. That is why it is called ignorance and not knowledge, not wisdom. Because knowledge can be either good or bad, as in wrong or right. You can have right knowledge, you can have wrong knowledge. But wisdom cannot be that. Wisdom cannot be right or wrong, wisdom is always right. Ignorance is the absence of wisdom. Not the absence of knowledge, by the way. Make sense? Ignorance is not the absence of wisdom, absence of knowledge. Ignorance is the presence of what knowledge? Bad knowledge, foul knowledge, misinformation. That's what ignorance is. I'm misinformed. Means I'm ignorant. So when there's bad knowledge, that bad knowledge suggests that you are a self, that a self exists. So what happens then when you put that knowledge into a mind? When ignorance dictates that there is a self, and that self is pleasurable, now immediately with that comes attachment. Why attachment? Because that is what is needed now, a self. But is there a self? There is no self. Now there is a void. There is now a deficiency. Because there's a necessity, but it's not there, therefore there's a deficiency. And because there's a deficiency, what happens to energy now? Whenever there's a deficiency, what does energy do? It responds to that, because energy has no bias. Therefore it cannot choose not to respond. Energy cannot choose not to respond. Why cannot energy choose not to respond? Because it has no bias, that's why. Simple as. It is a servant of necessity, energy. In fact, that is why it's called energy. It's the ability to respond. Its ability. Energy is in simple, a simple explanation or description of energy is ability. Ability to do what? Respond to necessity. That's what energy is. So whenever there's a necessity, energy immediately responds to it. Now, see, you have a chitta and there's a necessity for a self. And then there's energy there, waiting to respond to necessities. The moment you create a necessity for a self, what happens now? Energy immediately responds to that and manifests not a self but a sense of self, because this is just energy. Energy can never create a self. How could energy create a self? Energy can only make things that are made out of energy. Hello? Energy can only make... What can you make out of flour? A brick wall. Flour. You can only make things that are made of flour, that's it. What can you make of cement? Only things that are made of cement. Likewise, energy can only make things that are constituently energy. It cannot make anything that is non-energy. A self is not energy. Because a self is an entity. A self is not something that has a purpose. It's just there. No beginning, no end. There. Energy is not like that. Therefore, all energy can do is manifest a sense of self. A sense of self is very much doable to energy, because energy can do that on the mind. When you give the mind as its base, as its working platform, energy can twist the mind. Because the mind is energy after all. Nothing more. So what energy does, or rather what the mind does, is it twists around this necessity for a self. And around that necessity, you have not a self, but a sense of self. That's why it's always referred to as a sense of self and not self. That's why the Buddha does not accept this word Atma. Instead, he offers the word Jati. And he says, this is how Jati is formed. Avidya Pacchaya Sankara Pacchaya Vijnana Pacchaya Namarupa Pacchaya. He talks about the dependent origination process. Dependent origination of Jati. In other words, what he's saying is, Here's how energy responded to the deficiency of a sense of self. That's basically what he's saying. Now, how did we get there? I'm lost. Yes, the question was Nibbāna. So what happens then when we get to Nibbāna? So if that is what you are, energy constantly responding to necessities, what happens when there is no necessity? Exactly. Is energy destroyed, or is energy simply void of structure? It's just void of structure. It does not take order. That's why I've always told you, nature's order is chaos. But we don't like chaos because we have a relative order. Relative to us. Order to us is very subjective. What is order to you, madam, is not what is order to you. What is order to you, sir, is not what order is to the gentleman next to you. Order is a subjective matter. In the playground, what is order? Everyone sitting in straight lines without, like this. Is that order? No, that's madness. In the playground, but in the classroom. Do you see? Yeah, that's how you should be. Silent, quiet, sit in one place, looking at your books, not screaming, not shouting, not running around. That is order in the classroom. So if a teacher comes into the classroom and the teacher says order, like they do in the, where? In the courts and in the parliament, because there are kids everywhere. So when the speaker or the teacher or the judge calls the session into order, then people are supposed to conform. See? Beautiful word. Conform. That's why it's called conform. Not confirm. Conform. So, as in form, but as in agreement with something. Form in agreement to something. In agreement to what? The order that has just been placed. That is why we conform. So in the playground, we conform to the playground order. In the classroom, we conform to the classroom order. Make sense? Yeah. So then what happens to you when you get to Nibbāna? You are right now simply a conformation. You are a conformation of energy. Energy has conformed. As a body, as a mind, as well as jati, as your sense of self. So the first Nibbāna that's going to happen to you is called Keles Parinibbāna. In other words, one is the cessation of defilements, the next is the cessation of aggregation. These are both Parinibbāna. Can't remember which one now. Anyone remember the words? Sopadisesa and Anupadisesa. Thank you. Sopadisesa Nibbāna is the first bridge to cross. Sopadisesa Nibbāna is the first bridge to cross. This is where your need for a self is exterminated or extinguished. When the mind no longer feels the need for a self through the eradication of ignorance. That's what I'm doing here. Trying to share wisdom with you so that you will come out of ignorance. So when there's no longer ignorance, ladies and gentlemen, there is no longer an understanding, a bad knowledge that there is such a thing called a self. When the mind renounces this sense or this need for a self, where there is no need, there is no necessity, therefore there is no deficiency, therefore there is no need for energy to conform to that. Yes? Why would energy conform to something that does not exist? Makes no sense. Again, because energy has no bias. Where you don't bring an order, energy does not conform. So remove order, You remove confirmation. Then, so that is Sopadisesa Nibbāna. But what you are left with is the skandha, meaning your chittas, but no jati thereafter. So vipaka comes into play. You see things, you hear things, you smell things, you taste things, you feel things, you think things, and life goes on. Life goes on, but no sense of self goes on. Life goes on. This is what we call the Arahant. But what happens is, now in the mind of the Arahant, there is no need for further confirmation. There is no need to generate confirmation. Because bhava has been ceased. Bhava is the desire to continue conforming. So that is now ceased. As that is now ceased, when your body breaks down or your life faculty ceases, then energy no longer has an agenda to form whatever it is you are. Therefore, all the energy in your karmic strand that was waiting for the right opportunity, for the right moment to take fruit as vipaka, all that energy no longer has a purpose. Therefore, that energy simply disperses. Why does it disperse? Because there's no longer a necessity, no deficiency. It's the same as what's here. See? Is this a pen? Or is a pen a name that you give to condensed energy? Which one? The second one, isn't it? This is not a pen per se. It's simply a name that we give when energy is condensed in this way. If you condense energy this way, you call it a duster. But take the same energy and condense it this way, you would call it a pen again. So these are only names. That's why they call name form, namarupa. Names that we give to forms. Question? Okay. When you venerate the Buddha, what are you venerating? So, we are used to asking the question of who the Buddha was. And then we have literature, we have history that talks about this great man who lived 2,500 years ago and then passed away. And then they've made figures, statues of the Buddha, which as a custom or as a ritual or as a demonstration or display of our obeisance and our piety, we worship. At the beginning of the sermons, don't I always remind you that this is not a mere display or demonstration of our obeisance? Because, I don't entirely deny that part. I don't say this is not, stop worshipping the Buddha, because there was no Buddha. Because if I said that, you would not come back for a second sermon. You would not come back for a second sermon, not because you feel that I have offended you and your belief system. That's not the reason. You would not come back because you would no longer have the base to earn merits. Because to earn merits, you have to be ignorant. To either do merit or demerit, what must you be? Ignorant. Do you understand me, you ignorant buffoons? You have to be ignorant to do merit. What does a Ratanwan not do? They do neither merit nor demerit. Why? Because there's no ignorance. So imagine this. If I in the first sermon told you there's no Buddha, No one to worship, no one to venerate. There are no such things called parents, no such things called Buddhas, right? No Rahatan Mahanses, no such things called Rahatan Mahanses. There's just energy. What would you do from the second sermon onwards? They will ask, why do you offer alms? Because you're not there. You will quite literally come up to me and say, Swamina, you don't exist, right? So why should I give you any food? And the food doesn't exist either. And I don't exist either, so why should I give you any food? Don't you think that would be toxic to a mind that needs merit to understand this wisdom? That's why I say, the rocket flies upwards, but if you remove the ground beneath it, that is a journey that it will never take. Because to move upwards, you have to push downwards. So if I remove your footing, if I remove the base on which you stand, the ground on which you stand, if I remove that, you will not be earning any more merits after that. And merits is the currency that you need to go from understanding to wisdom. That's why I don't tell you that there is no Buddha, although there is no Buddha. When you come to terms with the Dhamma, when you really understand the Dhamma, one day you will know what I mean when I say there is no Buddha or when I say there was a Buddha. You will understand both of these. You will know that what I mean is a convention, that there was a collection of energy that we refer to as a Buddha. And was that not productive? Was that not useful? That collection of energy? Is this not useful? How would you write otherwise? Do you think because this is useless, we'll just make these? Let's just make these because these are of no use, of course. It's just energy, condensation of energy. Yeah, throw it away. Let's just make these ones. What use would this be without this? So energy, when it condenses a certain way, remember they always condense to respond to necessity. So there is a necessity then, isn't there? So whilst there is a necessity, there has to be a Buddha that responds to that necessity. So for as long as there are beings in this world that suffer, now there is a necessity. For as long as there are beings in this world that look for salvation, that look for freedom, that look for happiness, there will always be Buddhas. Because that calling for freedom is heard by the universe. Now don't ask me who hears it. That is not how it works. Energy responds where there is necessity. When you show compassion, like I said last week, we took the sixth precept and went into some depth last week, how it is the universe that we always interact with. So when you show compassion, compassion is shown upon you. When you give, you are given. When you help, you are helped. That's how it works. So then who is the Buddha? The Buddha was just a collection of energy. Where is the Buddha now then? What was the Buddha to begin with? Just a condensation of energy. So where is the Buddha now then? Maybe he's here. Maybe here. It all depends on what you mean by the Buddha. If you're asking me, Swami no answer, okay, I understand that the Buddha was merely condensation of energy. Where is that energy now? Who knows? Dispersed. Well, it could be dispersed, it could be condensed into something else. Because it's a cycle. It's just a cycle. There's nothing that goes through this cycle. Each step in the cycle is a response to a deficiency. Each node in this cycle, each element of this cycle is a response of energy to a deficiency. Therefore, these cycles will only cease when all deficiency has been exterminated. And when is that going to happen? That will never happen. So what will you become? Ke sera sera. You will you become nothing? No, you will always be energy. But it's not you who will be energy. In fact, don't worry about that future. What will you be? The problem is you are something now. You are pretending to be someone now. That's the problem. You are actually no one at all. Or you're pretending to be someone. Stop your pretenses. In a circle, there's no start or end. All there is just energy that responds to necessities. Where there is zero necessity, there is zero conformity. The reason we see all these things manifesting in and around us is because each of them is a response of energy to necessity. That is the principle of cause and effect. Bring in the cause of necessity, you have the effect of manifestation. Therefore, the phenomenon of cause and effect will always be there. You can't remove that. That is a characteristic of energy. And I will agree with the physicists, you cannot create or destroy energy. Because who's going to come and destroy that energy? Because to destroy, something has to come externally. To destroy something, if you want to destroy this doesn't destroy itself. You have someone else has to come and destroy this. So if energy is all there is, then who's going to destroy energy? It has to be another package of energy. So once this energy is destroyed, what's left? The energy that came to destroy this energy. So energy is not destroyed in the end. That's why it's madness to think of it in those terms. Therefore, try and get your minds out of this destruction, construction, this duality, creation and destruction. Both creation and destruction are ways that we have come to understand the world because of our very limited perception of reality. Because, we are our frame of reference for everything, aren't we? How do you understand just about anything in this world? With reference to yourself. You are right. Everything else has to agree with that. Yes or no? You are right and everything else has to agree to that. That's how you make sense of the world. If it's proven to you that you are wrong at some point, then what do? You quickly correct yourself. Answer this question for me as well then. Can you deliberately hold a false view? Knowing that it's false? Can I convince you that today is Saturday? How much can I pay you to convince you that today is Saturday? Or that today is Monday? Can I convince you anyway that today is Monday? You could go around saying, okay, let's all pretend that today is Sunday, or rather, today is Saturday, or today is Monday. You can pretend, but don't you know the truth? If there comes a point where you actually give up that knowledge and then accept that today is Saturday, in your world, today is Saturday. It's not a pretense anymore. It's like when people ask you, why did you do that? Why did you give it to him? I asked you to give it to the other person. And you say, no, I genuinely thought that you asked me to give it to that person. Then if they ask you, no, but why did you give it to that? You should have given it to that person. If I genuinely thought that this was the person I was supposed to give it to, who do you expect me to give it to? Okay, if you genuinely think, even if it's the wrong thing, if you genuinely think it's the right thing, then what is it to you? It's the right thing. Isn't it? That is what genuinely thinking actually means. Without question, without a shadow of a doubt, you think that something's right, even if that is wrong. It's up to others to then convince you that it's not right, it's the wrong thing. And if you are sufficiently convinced, what will you do? You will discard that bad knowledge and you will accept the new knowledge. Even if what you thought previously was right, but you are wrongly convinced now that this thing is right. That's why you can be convinced time and time again and still be convinced of the wrong thing. See how difficult is it for me to convince you of the right thing? 150 times I've tried so far. Only more, not less. And you are still not convinced. Even if this is the right thing, you are still not convinced. Because you still have your convictions of what you think is right. So if pleasure still is, you find pleasure pleasurable. And in those moments where you are struck by pleasure, you don't have the foresight, you don't have the wisdom to take a moment of pleasure and look at it insightfully and then contemplate that this is merely relief from vexation. There's nothing to write home about here. There's nothing to be joyful about here. There's nothing to climb on the rooftops and scream out my guts about this. This is merely a momentary relief from vexation. Unless you reflect upon that, in that moment of pleasure, it's pure pleasure. Yes or no? Exactly. And this is why your mind still seeks pleasure. That's why in those moments of pleasure, you look forward to the next moment of pleasure and the one after that and the one after that. But if there was someone, a noble friend in that moment to give you a slap or to knock your head against something and knock some sense into you and say, hey, you call yourself dharmishta? What pleasure? Isn't this a moment of relief from vexation? As you are knocked back into your senses, in that moment, you renounce the desire for pleasure. What happens in your lay lives, generally speaking, ladies and gentlemen, is that you don't have that noble association. Yesterday, Guru Amar gave a fantastic talk, like he always does. But yesterday he was talking about noble association not being simply the presence of another person with you. It's the presence of the truth always in you. Kalyanamitta. To become a Sotapanna is to have the Kalyanamitta in you. Until you become a Sotapanna, you can only have a Kalyanamitta with you. At times and not at other times. But once you become a Sotapanna, now the Kalyanamitta doesn't have to be with you because they are in you. Sometimes asleep. Still in you, but sometimes asleep. The next thing you've got to do is as you practice, you try and keep that Sotapanna awake as much of the time as possible. That's why it's called mindful awareness. Is to keep that Sotapanna awake for as long as possible. Until there comes a point where the Sotapanna does not sleep at all. And they're fully awake. That's why they're called the what one? The awakened one. Always awake. Never falls asleep again. This is the Rahatan Vahanse. Always awake. So, if the Rahatan Vahanse is the awakened one, what are you? The which one? The sleeping one. Oh, you sleeping beauties. The day you become a Sotapanna, maybe there are some among you who have already crossed that bridge. The day you become a Sotapanna, what happens then? You are awake some of the time. Because staying awake comes with practice. It's like standing up on your own 2 feet. That comes with practice. The first time you stood up, what happened? Gravity did its magic and reminded you, hey, I'm here, and pulled you back down to the ground. Then you figured that this is not just something you can do once and done. You figured you had to learn to stay upright. Didn't you? So what did you do after that? You practiced. Practice what? To remain standing. And it came with practice. Now you can stand up whenever you choose to. And you do it almost automatically. almost without thought. If you want to stand up, you are stood a moment later. You don't even think about it. That comes with practice. So remaining awake comes with practice until the day you become an awakened one. So there are 3 types of awakened ones. The Supreme Buddhas, the Pacceka Buddhas and the Arahata Buddhas. They are all awakened ones. Not awakened once. That is a Sotapanna. The Sotapanna is awakened once. But then you become an awakened one. So what happens after Nibbāna? Is that clear to you now then? What happens to you after Nibbāna? The question is not what happens to you after Nibbāna. Are you there for something to happen to at Nibbāna? That is the question. Who's there to whom something has to happen at Nibbāna? Who's there for something to happen to? There is no one for something to happen to. This is a mere sense of self that feels that I am here and I have to get to Nibbāna. Or I am here and I began somewhere. No. You never began anywhere. Only in this chitta were you a manifestation because of ignorance and attachment. And the vexation that was there. There was the necessity. So where there was a necessity, energy quickly conformed. That process is what the Buddha explains as the dependent origination process. I love that word or that phrase, because dependent, meaning there's a necessity, there's a deficiency. A dependent is someone who has a deficiency. When someone's dependent on you, what does that mean? They are deficient in something, aren't they? So you can say, my spouse is dependent on me. My children are dependent on me. So when you apply for these visas and whatnot, you have worker visas, you have dependent visas. What does that mean? That other individual is dependent on your income, on your care, on whatever. Therefore, they can only remain in that country until you're also there. So if ever you are kicked out, then so must the dependent. Hence, dependent origination. So there's a deficiency. So where there's a deficiency, there has to be an origination to suffice that deficiency. And the structure of that origination is dependent on the structure of the deficiency. Therefore, the ingredients always take the shape of the caste, of the mold, of the structure. That's the way it works. Have I not just explained to you the entire universe? So then that will be the last sermon. I mean, I've got nothing more to tell you. If I've told you this, I've told you everything. What more is there for me to tell you? Have I not just told you everything there is to know? Have I or haven't I? Haven't I just shared with you everything there is to know? Can't you understand the entire universe, the entire cosmos, all of creation, all of existence, simply by extension of what I have just shared with you? Then you are God. That's it. You don't need me again. Because now you have the teaching. The teaching that explains everything. This is why they call this is the theory of everything. Anicca, dukkha and anatta. All there is energy. Energy can neither be destroyed nor created because it has no start or end. That's why energy can't be created or destroyed. Again, don't think of energy as a straight line. Energy itself is in a cycle. Each manifestation of energy is a precursor and a successor to something either side of it. Do you have a question, madam? Okay. So Dhatu Parinibbāna is the same as Skandha Parinibbāna. So we talked about the Sopadisesa Nibbāna, which is where there is no longer a desire for a sense of self. Once the desire or once the necessity or the deficiency for a sense of self ceases, energy no longer has to conform to it. But the vipaka in your karmic strand, actually you can't call it vipaka until it takes fruit. Until then you have to call it karma. This is your karmic strand. It's not your karmic strand, it's a karmic strand. Each of these is a karmic seed. Remember, it's called karmic because this is not where the karma happens. Karma happens in the mind. This is the result of a karma. Hence, not karma seeds, but karmic. Karma ja. That's the Pali or Sinhalese terms. Ja suggests produced by. Okay? So, these are your karmic seeds. When one of these is released, this has everything needed or is required to create a chitta. There's a base that we call the mind base. So you can think of this like a ship landing on a surface, or a spaceship landing on the moon. So there's a mind base, and on that mind base, a vipaka takes fruit. As a result, you have a chitta. That base is what each chitta either defiles or purifies. Okay, we are going too far. That's for another day. The lady's question was Skandha Parinibbāna. Each of these chittas is the coming to fruition of a karmic seed. So when one of these is released, this either becomes sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and so on. That I think you all know pretty much. So now, this is energy. Why is this energy? It's energy because this is energy. Why is this energy? That's what everything is. There's nothing other than energy. So if everything is energy, then of course this is energy, everything else is energy. So chitta is energy. So when one of these takes fruition, the whole point here is for this energy to be released, dispersed. Because this is in a state of condensation. It's condensed form. This is an opportunity for this energy to be released, to be dispersed. Not to be condensed, but to be dispersed. But, Swamin answer. Just like you ask, but if Swamin answer, what if Swamin answer? Subtle hint. What happens is, this chitta drops on a mind base with ignorance. Because there's ignorance, there's still a necessity for a sense of self. Okay? A sense of self, when there's a sense of self, ladies and gentlemen, there's a need to there's a need for survival. There's a need to prolong its existence. There's a need, therefore, to gather. Remember hunter-gatherers from the past? That was a survival strategy. That was a strategy for survival. I'll give you a very simple question, give you a point to consider. when you exercise, is it painful or painless? When you exercise is painful, isn't it? It's very taxing on your body, it's painful. After you exercise for a while, you want to get some rest. Because exercise is not fun. You might like the results of your exercise at the end, but exercise itself is not fun at all. So burning away calories is not fun. But what about piling it up? I can see faces now. Can't wait till this sermon ends, Swaminathan. What are you talking about? It's already 11:30, Swaminathan. You're still talking. Why don't you let our mouths also to do something? See, piling on the calories is not painful. It's not taxing. It doesn't hurt. What does that tell you about the mind? That dirty, dirty, dirty mind of yours. What does that tell you about the mind? What the mind wants is to keep condensing energy and reserve it for itself. Because food is nothing more than energy. It's energy in nature. Whether you call it a roti or a sandwich or rice or anything, fruit, anything for that matter, it's just energy. Taking energy and keeping it and hoarding it for yourself is not painful, is it? You only stop when you feel full. I mean, we can use intelligence and know when we should eat and how much we should eat, but that is also questionable. Sometimes we forget. And we just keep on piling. When you're upset, comfort eating, you just keep on throwing it in. Because that's not painful. But exercise, would you do it? Would you do exercise for fun? No, exercise is not fun. Because what does exercise do? It releases that energy into the universe. Because that's not what your bodies are designed to. Your mind doesn't want that. Your mind wants to aggregate and hoard energy, not let it go, not let it loose, not release it to the environment, to nature, because the mind always thinks that it is king. It is supreme. I am an individual. Therefore, I need energy for myself. That's why piling it in, taking it in is not painful, but burning it away is painful. Do you see how your bodies are designed to be like that? So who's the creator then? Whose creation do you think this is? Of course, who else? It's the mind. It's the mind's dirty business. In the same way, this energy is now prepared, is now ready to be released. But who's there? This is the mind based with ignorance. Who's there? Someone who thinks that they are. They are there. Therefore, energy that is now supposed to be released is what happens to it? It's captured again. And returned to the karmic strand. So the opportunity that this energy had to be released to nature is stolen from it and it's returned to the karmic strand. And therefore, that feeds the cycle. So, kamma vipaka vattanti, vipako kamma sambhaho, tasma punabbhavo hoti, evan loko pavattati. This is how the world goes on. Because of this need for separation, for a sense of self. Actually, this sense of self is the desire to feel separate. It comes out of the need to measure. We'll talk about that another time. How each of your cankers contribute to this menace of existence. It's very interesting, the Dhamma, ladies and gentlemen, but I don't want to teach it to you for the purpose of studying it. That's why I sometimes draw a line and say, no, enough. Some of these principles, some of these concepts, it's too soon to share them with you because this will not do much, will not be of much value to you. That is not me undermining your intellectual capacity or your intelligence. It's the fact that you can't practice this. Not you won't, but you can't. You would if you could. Why can't you? Not why won't you, but why can't you? Because you're at home. You have far too many things to be concerned and worried about. You got to pay the bills, you got to send the children to school, you got to cook dinner, you got to do your meals, you got to go to the work, you got to file those reports, you got to do your end of years, you got to do all that stuff. And be completely and entirely and all day round surrounded by ignoble association who constantly keep telling you that this world is full of separate entities. Forgive me for using this expression. It is not meant literally, but this is pearls before swine. I didn't mean it literally. What is the point of laying pearls before swine? But I encourage you to do merit. Let me tell you why I encourage you to do merit. So that you can propel yourself. Leave ground base. Start flying. Once you take off, I can teach you how to cross the stratosphere and the exosphere until you can come out of the atmosphere and fly into free space. But until you take off, my instruction on what to do after takeoff is of what use? Tell me. My instruction on what to do after takeoff is of what use to you before you take off? Until then, let's next make sure that you have enough fuel. You have worked out the physics for takeoff, and your, whatever the setup is ready, and people are ready to let you take off, and you're not tied and bound to so many different things that if you take off, no sooner than you take off, it's just going to pull you back down to earth. All these bonds that you have are constantly pulling you back down and tying you to earth. So how can you take off? That is why I spoke to you last week. This Dhamma is so beautiful, so profound. I can take you to the end of time, ladies and gentlemen. I can take you to the end of existence because I can see it so clearly. But there is no point in me sharing some of these things with you until you take off. To be quite frank with you, more than 50% of what I've talked to you about today is pointless. I just enjoyed a jolly good ride. As I always say, you bring the lamp and I see the light. Your lamps are the lamps of merit, but I see the light of wisdom. Did I not thank you for this sermon a little while ago? So I benefit from these talks personally because I get to see more Dhamma. I get to see more truths in daylight. What used to be visible in the moonlight is now visible in daylight. Because you come here with lots and lots and lots of merits. You go to Dambul, you do that merit work. You go to Andigama, you do that merit work. You do this at the monastery. You do give alms here. You do all this merit work, and then you come here with massive lamps, with huge flames. I see the light. That's why my invitation to you is, there's never been a better time to come to the sasana. Oh, I can swear on this. There's never been a better time to come to the sasana. Because the Dhamma is so ripe, it's so juicy. I can hold your hand and walk you to Arahathood. The path is so clear. So crystal clear. There's no doubt at all as to whether this is the path to Nibbāna, whether Nibbāna exists, whether we can get there in this lifetime. Those were questions I used to have. Not anymore. It's crystal clear. Have I not just given to you in one sermon how everything comes into existence? In one talk. This didn't happen on the first talk. I wasn't even able to explain to you all this in the way that we just talked about today in the first talk. In the very first talk I gave as a monk, I would probably have just touched the surface. I can't say I came into the sasana blind. I knew there was something here, something of great value. But today, I'm not just scratching the surface. You're only delaying it. And also remember this, finally. I am sharing with you my wisdom after years of practice. To you, this is mere knowledge. You're hearing me say these words and trying to make sense of them. In other words, you're hearing what I have learnt. That doesn't mean you are where I am. I only mean this in the nicest possible way. If you understand where I'm coming from, that doesn't mean you are where I am just because you hear what I say. What I want for you is to come up with your own wisdom so that you can understand what I understand through the Dhamma. See, we are making discoveries. You're hearing things you've never heard before. Those are discoveries. But you're hearing things and I'm discovering. You're listening to a sermon where I'm talking to you about things that I have discovered. I have my tools and I'm digging my mind. And I'm bringing out gems and say, hey, see, lovely gem, isn't it? And you're all giving me a nice round of applause and say, yeah, lovely gem, it's a lovely gem. So we put it to a side. And I go back into the mine again with my axe and my tools, and I'm digging again. And I get another gem, and I bring it up and say, another gem, isn't it? Beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, you go, yeah, it's a beautiful gem. So put another one. Remember, these are all my gems. I am the one who's digging the mine. It's my mine I'm digging. You're rejoicing in the gems that I surface. When you go to the museum, once I went to, I can't remember which palace it is now, where they display the crown jewels in the UK. Can't remember which palace it is, but they display the Queen's, basically the crown jewels. Her scepter, the crown, and all the rest of it. They let us look at them, but they don't let us walk away with them. Basically the saying goes, you can look, but you can't touch. It's a sight to behold. It's beautiful. But they are not mine. I can look at them, I can enjoy the sight, but I have to buy a ticket. Do you think the Queen also has to purchase a ticket to go and look at the crown jewels? What about to put it on her head? Maybe surely for that she has to buy a ticket. Why not? Because they are, or at least they were hers. Now they are his. When I was there, it was hers. But when we went in there, we had to buy a ticket. And we weren't even allowed to touch it. All you could do was watch it from a distance. Because they were not mine. What are we doing here? Every Sunday morning? I bring in my crown jewels. And I lay them out on the table. Because I spent a week digging them up with my axe, doing merit, working hard, surfacing them, going down the tunnels into the deep earth, digging them up, and then I bring them and display them. And you all come here to see them. And then you stand and give us lovely ovation. Say, nice one, Swaminatha, nice one, well done, Swaminatha. And then you go back home. With the jewels or leaving the jewels? Leaving the jewels. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? I am telling you that each and every one of you is entitled to your own jewels. You have them, you are simply not digging for them. You don't need my jewels, ladies and gentlemen. You can have your own. Don't settle for simply coming here, watching them, looking at them, and rejoicing in my jewels. Because you have your own. You are entitled to your own, but you've got to dig them up. For that you have to take off. For as long as you are grounded, your rocket will never leave the atmosphere. Because you have to break free from gravity. Prepare yourself for that. Prepare yourself to remove yourself from all those bonds that are keeping you bound to earth that will never let you take off. Last week I promised I won't talk about this, but here we are again. Me and my false promises. But you understand it, I think. You get the gist of it. This is simply energy. It has now served its purpose as it becomes a vipaka. And then it's just ready to be dispersed. But there's a sense of self in that mind that recaptures that energy and pumps it back up into the karmic strand. Therefore, making this an incessant loop. This is a self-sufficient process. You don't need to feed it externally. So what's the start? What's the end? When did you begin? When will you end? It is neither you that begins or ends. All that ends is your sense of you, not your journey. Did you understand that? It's not your journey that starts or ends, or that started and one day will end. It's not your journey. It's your sense that it is you who's traveling. That's what ends. So why are we bothered then? Why do we want to end this feeling of me, a traveler, an agent? Because that is what causes the 11 great fires. That's why. For as long as you feel that it is you who's traveling, you have fear, you have anger, you have lust, you have jealousy, you have greed, you have shame, you have guilt, you have embarrassment, you have anxiety, you have stress, you feel suicidal. All this. All these are the price you pay for thinking that it is you that's going in samsara. All we are trying to do is to give up that sense of agency. Samsara will keep going. It just won't be you. Then it's not a problem. I'm sorry if that was too deep and if that hardly made any sense, but it's the truth nonetheless. Those are my crown jewels. Not yours. The day you can come up here and give that talk, I will agree that these are your crown jewels, so you also have the same. But until then, if you come here and simply listen to this sermon, you are spectators. I'm the athlete. The reason I'm sharing this with you is because I'm not happy about the fact that I'm the only athlete here and you're all spectators, because that is not why I come here. Not to show you how good an athlete I am. I don't want to do that. I don't need to do that. I don't need to show myself off. I don't want to impress you. What for? Who's there to impress? And who's there to be impressed? I've already realized that there's no one to impress and no one to be impressed by. Therefore, that is not my purpose here. I want you all to join the race. Let's run. Become athletes. Because spectators never won a prize. Have you heard of the best spectator prize? At the Olympics? Ladies and gentlemen, the award for best spectator goes to... Ever heard that? No. Neither gold, nor silver, nor bronze ended with a spectator. They didn't even get a concessionary prize. As a matter of fact, they had to buy a ticket to enter the stadium. Whereas the athletes, they were invited. The spectators, they bought a ticket. I hope you understand that I speak with love. I'm mocking you, yes, but I'm doing it out of compassion because I want you to stop being spectators, because you never win a prize for being a spectator. There are no awards for that. And the reason for that is just about anyone can be a spectator. Just about anyone can be a spectator. No one gets a prize for doing something anyone can do. Do they? Do people get prizes for doing something that anyone can do, like for sleeping? Is there a prize for the best sleeper? No, but if you stay awake, I'm sure there's in the Guinness Book of World Records a man or woman somewhere who stayed awake for the longest period of time. But I don't think there's one for the one who slept for the most for the most length of time. Because any dog can do that. Anyone can do that. But to stay awake when all odds are against you, that requires courage, willpower, determination, perseverance, strength of character, integrity, humility, humbleness, relentlessly pursuing your ambitions, no matter what the price it is you have to pay. Those are things not everyone has. That's why when you have them, you go on to achieve great things, ladies and gentlemen. You become worthy. You become worthy of worship. You become worthy of veneration. You become worthy of a prize. Understand? Good. Thank you for a wonderful sermon. No, don't thank me. Thank you. As a quick announcement, next Saturday we have an ordination ceremony at the monastery. As always, you're all very welcome for two reasons. One, they're your sons. Perhaps not your biological sons today, but in this long journey of samsara, they'll have been sons to you countless times. You will realize that when they start preaching to you, how your merits are drawn through them and how those samsaric transactions are being reconciled. That's when it will come to your awareness that this must be, or they must be sons from my past. But take it from me for now, that these are all individuals we have always come across. This is not the first time we've met. Hopefully this will be the last time. I don't want to see your faces again. But this is not the first time we've met. We've come together like this countless times. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, as like parents do with their children, we are giving you the Dhamma. Like parents who are interested in their children's well-being. Your teachers, the Mahasangha, they're helping you one step at a time. They're coming down to the level at which you are and trying holding your hand up to help you walk, to help you stand up, to help you run. To me, that is like what parents do with their children. I can't think of another way to describe that relationship. And in the same way, you do the other way. Just as parents did for us when we were younger, today you look after us. I understand fully that you know that there is a lot of merit to be gained behind it. But you also do it because you want to support our mission. You want to support us both individually as well as the mission of propagating the Sambuddha Sasana. So just as our parents did when we were younger, today you are doing it. And the second reason I would like you to be there is I want you to make a determination when you are there. A really good time to make that kind of determination is in the presence of something unfolding in front of your very eyes. Because then it's very vivid to you. It's very lively to you. You can see it in action. It's happening in front of you. Those are precious moments. Today it's a very commonplace at our monastery. We have an ordination ceremony once every 3-4 months. But it's not so common, really. It's a rarity. Not just in this world, but also in our country. The only reason we are so privileged to have these ordination ceremonies so often, so frequently, is because the Dhamma is with us. That's why. These young sons and daughters, they're not coming to us because they have no homes, no parents to look after them, or no husbands or wives who would do every bit for everything they need. It is because they have finally come across the Dhamma. They have heard the Dhamma. And they have come to realize, this is what I've always been looking for in my life. It was not a husband or a wife I needed. It was not a big house or a swimming pool that I needed. It was not a nice car or a nice job I needed. It was not money I needed. It was happiness. And finally I found it. That is why they keep coming. They keep coming in the tens. They keep coming in the hundreds. This number will only keep going up. I want you to be there, therefore. I would like you to be there. This is not placing a demand. This is making a well-thought suggestion to you. If you can be there as it happens and make that determination, see yourself in their shoes, on the stage, beseeching your salvation from your teachers. Because I can tell you one thing for sure, I have done that many times in the past. As a result of those determinations, that was the deficiency. Therefore, energy started to gather around that, like a vortex, finally producing the result that you see here today. I'm sure countless times I would have made the same resolve. May I, just as those young men stand there before their teachers and beseech their salvation, beseech their robes so that they can go forth in the sasana, may I also one day be able to do that. I'm sure I've made that determination many a time. This time round, it has come to fruition. Hard work, not easy. This is why I invite you, be there for your sake. Be there for their sake, be there for your sake, be there for everyone's sake. I would not make this invitation if it was just done casually. No, I'm doing it with very good reason. So if you can, you be there. So that's happening on the 29th. Saturday. Put a date in your diaries if you can. Be there. Be there and then be there. Let's do the merit transfer then and bring the sermon to a close. Let us take this moment then to transfer the merits that we have all acquired today by making offerings to the infinite virtues of the Noble Triple Gem, and by inviting the Swami Master to deliver the sermon, as well as creating a conducive environment for all to practice the Dhamma. First and foremost, let us transfer this message to the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, upasakas and upasikas, who have since time immemorial protected and preserved the sublime teachings of the Buddha and passed it down through the generations of the noble lineage in the form of the Tripitaka, which is thankfully available to us today to study, understand and comprehend the Dhamma. Let us also transfer this message to the Mahanayaka Theras, the Anunayaka Theras of all the chapters who have dedicated their lives to protect and preserve the Sambuddha Sasana, Let us also transfer this message to the monks and nuns resident in your local temples and nunneries who have always been by your side through thick and thin, come rain or shine. Let us also transfer this message to my teacher, Guru Swami Mahanse, as well as all the monks resident in the monastery and the anagarikas and anagarikas attached to the monastery. Let us also transfer this message to friends of our monastery, our devotees, who for the sake of merits to help them attain the supreme bliss of Nibbāna, continue to sustain the Mahasangha. This is all of you who provide the Mahasangha with shelter, alms, robes and medicines, and pass on your know-how and continue to extend your well wishes. May they all rejoice in these merits. Let us also transfer this message to our mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, nephews and nieces, our friends, our acquaintances, our employers and our employees, our teachers, as well as anyone and everyone who've helped us, supported us and assisted us in any way, shape and form possible and available to them. Let us remind ourselves that they have always gone an extra mile on our behalf, and therefore with a sense of gratitude, let us transfer all these merits that we have acquired to all of them. May by the power of these merits they be healed of any physical and mental ailments and overcome any obstacles to their spiritual progress. May they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbāna. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also transfer this message to the Devas and Brahmas, spirits and demons, primarily the Sakadeva, as well as all the numerous gods and deities who have committed themselves to fulfill and preserve the Sambuddha Sasana. Let us transfer this message to our guardian deities who keep a watchful eye over us and keep us out of harm's way. May they prosper in divine power and wisdom. May they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbāna. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also transfer this message to our forefathers, our ancestors, those who passed away in our name, reminding ourselves that it is in their blood, sweat and tears today we are able to enjoy the comforts of life as we do. Let us also transfer this message to members of the armed forces as well as the police force, as well as those who sacrifice and commit their lives to preserve our nation, to protect our nation, to lead our nation. Reminding ourselves that we are able to practice this path in peace and harmony thanks to their efforts, collectively and individually. Let us also transfer this message to those who lost their lives in the wars, be they friend or foe, as well as those who lost their lives in natural disasters and calamities such as tsunamis and earthquakes, landslides, fires, floods, pandemics and so on. Reminding ourselves that in this infinitely long journey of samsara, they will all have been parents to us, siblings to us, friends to us, and individuals who have gone as far as possible to help us and make our lives better. Therefore, with an abundance of compassion and loving kindness and a sense of gratitude for all that they have done for us, let us transfer all these merits that we've acquired to all of them. May, by the power of these merits, if any of them have been born in the woeful plane, they redeem themselves to be born in the blissful plane. May, by the power of these merits, they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbāna. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may by the power and blessings of all the merits we have acquired throughout the day, we be able to witness the advent of many hundreds of thousands of arahants on this blessed land. And may you and I and everyone who's helped make this program a success become a Rahatan Mahanse or an Arahat Theranin Mahanse in this very life itself and in the era of this Sri Sambuddha Sasana itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May the blessings of the Noble Triple Gem be with you all. The Mahasangha will transfer their blessings to you. Rāga ginnen nidatva, dvesha ginnen nidatva, moha ginnen nidatva, Nibbāna parama sukhayan Sukhita Taravitva, Nibbāna parama sukhayan Sukhita Taravitva, Mamada Siyaro Loka Siyaro Satvayo Nibbāna parama sukhayan Sukhita taravitva, Nibbāna parama sukhayan Sukhita taravitva, Nibbāna parama sukhayan Sukhita taravitva, Rajagiriya niveva, ක්ලේශගිනි නිවේවා මෝහගිනි නිවේවා නිවන් සැප ලැබේවා නිවන් සැප ලැබේවා නිවන් සැප ලැබේවා තුන්රුවන්ගේ සුවිසි අනන්ත මහා ගුණ බෙලෙන් සියලු ලෝක සියලු සත්වයෝම නිබ්බාන පරම සුඛයෙන් සුඛතර වෙත්වා සාදු සාදු සාදු